Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Likewise. Hey, so I think this is pretty amazing because I am now in this location, which is my favorite place on the planet. And I grew up in Calgary, 90 minutes away, which was not 90 minutes last night. It's several hours away last night. But you know, as I grew up in Calgary, I took this test in middle school, and it said that I would be most qualified to be a beehive keeper or a net sorter, which is pretty amazing. It was really inspiring. And my dad, who was, he never went past a 9th grade education. He was a barber. My mom came from retail. I find it amazing to actually be here. We used to come to the Banff Springs Hotel and be like, wow, like really amazing people get to stay here. So we would walk through and then quickly exit and leave and not really stay here. So to get to stay here and to get to stand here on stage is really exceptional and special to me, and this, you know, again, my favorite place on the planet. And it does go to show that anything is possible. And where we are in our careers and where we are in this time is that we have this incredible access to information, right? There is so much data we can get about our customers. We have an incredible access to really talented individuals, and we have great access to technology. And all of us have pretty much ubiquitous access to that if we're here today. But some brands are actually good, some are not so good, and some are actually great. And the difference between good and great is the difference in how all those three come together in terms of people and data and technology. The good and the great, what separates the good from the great is, number one, I think fundamentally is the ability to understand like what you're all about. Either you as an individual or especially your brand, what do you stand for and what do you not stand for? And the ability to know that and tell the story and connect with your customers and connect with your employees about that focus is, I think, what separates good and great. So if we think about good and great, it is the connection of hearts and minds. I have this irrational connection to a set of products and their Nest products, right? I love my Nest products, which seems ridiculous to say. And if I were to back up 20 years and say, I would love my thermostat, like I would really love it. And I would really, really have this love for my smoke detector. But I do. And it seems irrational, but it actually isn't, because it keeps my house safe, but it actually knows that my family is safe. So I travel a lot, often take 5 or 6 flights a week. And so my kids, I have 3 boys who are 14, 15, 16, I'm lucky they know how to cook. But often they know how to cook by experimenting, and I will get these messages when I'm on the road that says, smoke detected in your kitchen. Smoke is still detected in your kitchen, alarms are about to go off. And it gives me this sense of security, kind of, right? I can't do anything because I'm probably thousands of miles away, but it gives me this sense of security that something else is watching, and there is, bless you, and that I actually feel this, not only that, if there's a fire, something's there, but that my family's safer. And this emotional connection that I have, as well as this technical connection that I have to these products. And that's what actually creates this love for products, is if you can actually sustain this thought of, I have this practical purpose that I serve for my customers, and then I'm able to actually have this emotional connection. That's where good and great actually differentiates itself. And that's where you can build the momentum you want to build and build this iconic status that we're all here to build for our brands. And what it comes down to also is this application of fundamentals. And in the 60s, the fundamentals that were established for marketing were product, place, price, and promotion, right? And I'd say that as marketers, those fundamentals haven't changed. And we're still in the business of actually building these relationships. And so we're in this business of building relationships and not necessarily transactions, right? We want to build market share, and we want to build mind share, and we want to sustain that. If you build a transaction, you're just going to churn through your customers, and you have to find new customers all the time, right? If people like your transaction, they're like, yeah, I might actually, buy this product again. But if they love your product, they're going to evangelize your product. They're going to buy more of your product, and probably more than they should of your product, should in terms of percentage of their wealth or income, or budget if they're a company. Right? And that's the goal that we're driving, but the product is no longer, back in the 60s, product was actually the product that actually sat physically on the shelf. Now the notion of product has changed. The notion of product has changed because the product is now enveloped in the experience. So I had the fortunate opportunity to actually work on Amazon Go back in the day. because the project started a long time ago. And Amazon Go is an interesting concept because it actually is a convenience store. But it wasn't like Amazon said, like, let's just open a convenience store. That seems like a really good idea. What Amazon is all about is really, and they're very, very focused. They're an exceptional company at using data, but an exceptional company at knowing what they stand for. And that is service and convenience and price, right? It's really challenging to compete against Amazon on those three fronts. And like, we're going to open a physical store, which seems totally orthogonal to their original strategy of being an online retailer. But the advantage of actually Amazon Go is they have this exceptional amount of data on what people buy by the block, right? In terms of, in this block, these people like this color of smart water versus in this block, people like a different color of smart water, not smart water, or sorry, vitamin water, or not at all. And so they can take all that telemetry and initially stock their store. But they have these custom cameras within the store. For those of you who might not have gone or read about them, there's all these cameras in the store that actually watch people shop. And so in watching people shop, they watch people, and it watches people shop for two reasons. Number one, to see where people stop, to see what products actually are engaged with, to see what people pick up, look at, put back on the shelf, to see what people look up and actually put in their bag. Because what gets put in your bag is actually what you're charged for. Right? And so you're charged for that, and then once you put everything that you want in your bag or your pockets, wherever you put them, and you walk out, there's never a checkout process. A checkout process happened as you're actually shopping. So they get two things. Number one, they see how you're interacting with their products, which helps them take that telemetry and apply it online and in Whole Foods now. And it allows them to actually see what people actually like and don't like so they can actually reassort and stock the things that actually move the most. And so they take that data, and then they take that individual data for whatever you carried out in your pockets or in your bag, and then they know that about you. So then they know when you go on Amazon what to recommend for you and what products you may or may not buy. So the product itself is actually not the products that you're buying at the convenience store. The product for Amazon is actually the experience of being at Amazon Go, but they're able to extend the experience that they've had with you to other parts of their business, which is absolutely brilliant and pays dividends for them. Now, if you think of a notion of GE Healthcare, GE Healthcare builds products. They make products to actually help people diagnose, help doctors diagnose and hospitals diagnose and administer anesthesia. So diagnose maladies and actually administer anesthesia. So they help doctors do their jobs. Right? And so when you build these relationships, like any relationship, too much of a good thing is too much. Right? And you think that's a no-brainer. Like if you're starting to engage in a relationship, whether it's a friend or someone you may want to date or marry, I mean, calling them all the time and saying, do you want to go out? How about now? How about now? How about now? Right? You think that's funny, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's no way you would do that, right? Because that's creepy, and you would seem like that's stalker status, right? But we do that as marketers all the time. And so when we started working with GE Healthcare, they were sending their customers up to 13 emails a week. Now you think of that, and you're sending their customers, like it was doctors and hospitals, 13 emails a week. Like, how much engagement did you actually think they would get? I mean, that is like approaching annoying kind of stalker status, which is not what you want to do as a brand. And so as we worked with them, we helped them actually take their data and understand what customers owned. So the relationship they'd already established, right? If they're working with a set of neurologists, they're not going to actually try to sell oncology products to them, right? They're going to sell like actual products that actually are relevant to neurologists, like imaging, et cetera. What they also can do now is actually take information about the offices or the hospitals that they actually do business with, and they can look at whether there's press releases about those offices. A press release like they're opening another location, or a press release that they've just hired another doctor. That information is key because it actually is a signal that they may be willing to invest more. And so as they've actually started to look at the actual information that they've had about their customers, as they've looked at third-party information, they've actually been able to increase their engagement rate with their customers by 300%, which is absolutely exceptional. Now, if you think of the notion of promotion, right? And the notion of promotion back in the 60s was, let's put ads out on soap opera shows, which is why they're called soap operas. Let's put ads in, magazines or billboards, which are still all relevant today. But the notion of putting out promotions now, the notion of being good or great, is that great brands actually drive a pull versus a push towards the promotions that they offer. So if you think about promotions, you think about STRAVA. Most of us here are here because we want to be better, right? We want to be better marketers. We want to do better by our brands. So in some way, whether you're an athlete or not, you're competitive. I am wickedly competitive. I hate losing. And I wouldn't consider myself an athlete, but I like to be athletic. Like if I think of my 3 sons, like they legit can enter a race and, win. I just want to survive, right? I just want to survive that race. And so when I started running really early on in my career, I was both mentally better off and people I worked with were happier because I was happier. But also I was just healthier, right? And so I started running and then I actually got an injury, so I started cycling and I started using the application STRAVA. And when I started using the application, I started getting messages from the application because I got the free version. And it started saying, you could find out in this segment that you just cycled who was faster than you. I'm like, that sounds really interesting. And they would do it right after I finished a ride, right? And they would say, like, you could actually find out who was faster. I was like, it's interesting. And then they started sending me messages saying, well, someone else was actually faster than you going through this segment. I'm like, I want to know by how much I was faster. And so I got the premium, or they call the summit package, but, I forget the package that they called it, but I got the premium package and I started paying for it. And they started validating the fact that I wanted to continue to pay for it because it became this addiction. I was like, how many awards did I get when I did this cycle? How many people did I beat? Where do I sit on the leaderboard? And so for those of you who have Strava, you can be king of the mountain or queen of the mountain, which means you actually won that segment. And then you actually are the top for the month or the year or ever. And then if you're the queen of the mountain forever, the king of the mountain forever, for that point in time, they actually send you an email when someone sniped your badge of honor. And you're like, damn it, I need to get it back out there and work out. And so it actually enables me to be as competitive as I want to be against myself, but it turns out against other people too, that I don't even know, but it motivates me, and it actually motivates me and continues to validate the fact that I want to continue to pay for this service. So it was top of mind in terms of the promotion that they pushed to me because it was right after I had cycled. Now, if we think about building a relationship, you think about human relationships, and that's what we're doing. Whether you're building a relationship with a new friend, whether you're building a relationship with somebody, a new customer, you want to take advantage of cues. And the ideal is that you're going to take advantage and look at visual cues, right? People give you visual cues all the time, right? If you're talking to somebody and engaging with them and they're looking at their phone, probably not that interested in what you're saying, or maybe they're taking notes, who knows? But if it's a one-on-one conversation, probably not. If they're looking at their watch all the time, that's a visual cue. Well, it turns out now we have this technology where we're able to use digital cues to actually look at the cues of what the body language, if you will, the digital language of what our customers are telling us. And so when we started working with Verizon, what they realized that they were just doing batch and blast. They were just saying, well, these types of people we think want to hear this message. But they realized they weren't seeing the type of engagement they wanted to see. So they started listening. They started looking at the digital cues of their customers and looking at, well, this is how they typically engage with us. Some engage with us on our website. Some engage with us in our email. So we're able to capture all that data and actually feed it into our system, into Marketo, and be able to say, hey, Verizon, you want to connect with your customers better. And they've actually been able to increase their response rate when a customer has a problem by 90%. And so there's these material ways that we can actually listen to our customers. Like you would sit there and you wouldn't continue to talk to somebody if they're looking at their watch and if they look like they're walking away. Yet we continue to do that with our own customers because we're not listening, we're not using the information that we have at our disposal to be able to engage with them in new and better ways. The same holds true for someone we've been working with, which is the Portland Trail Blazers. Part of being a team is winning the games, but part of being a team is actually building this culture within your community, right? Having your whole community rally on your behalf. But that means that you want people to rally on your behalf when they actually come to the games, but also in your away games and in between games and in the between season when there isn't in between seasons, right? You want to continue that engagement with your fan base. Well, what Portland Trail Blazers had done was that they started listening. And so they started listening, they started realizing that some of their fans never lived in Portland, would never ever actually probably make it, or if they did, it would be an off chance they would actually make it into the stadium to see a game, but they were really rabid fans outside. And so what they started looking at is these patterns of how their customers would communicate and the fans would communicate with them. And they saw that some would communicate digitally outside of Portland, but were still these raging fans. And then they thought about the people that were engaging with them who would go frequently to their games and sometimes not. So they started looking at these patterns and started listening to their customers and really connecting and saying, hey, how do we actually look at the people who are interested in coming into our venue and inviting them more frequently and engaging them so they have a reason to be there? And then how do we think about the people who want to engage digitally and engage with them that way because they actually won't come in? So don't actually advertise seasons tickets because they probably aren't going to buy them, but they probably are going to engage really significantly digitally. And so they started doing that, and they realized that their stadium was more full, and they actually significantly increased the type of engagement they saw among people who were at the stadium and the people who were never going to go to the stadium. So they increased their fan base. And then were just able to build that culture, that type of culture and connection that they need to and want to as a brand, as a sports team. The next is the notion of place. So if you think about the conversation that we're having right now is just about the fundamentals and thinking about these fundamentals and going, oh, then they're no-brainer things that we actually know. Like, this is nothing new that we've talked about today, right now, right? And most of the things that we've heard about through this course of the gathering are things that are, yeah, of course we do those, but then when we get back to our offices, we sit down and we continue to repeat these things. But the things, again, that distinguish us from good and great brands is that the fundamentals, great brands actually think about the fundamentals and think about them with every single touch point that they have with their customers. And that holds true with the notion of place. If we think about place back in the 60s when the 4 Ps were invented, if you will, place was thinking about like how much shelf space did you take, right? Or where should your location be for a store? Now the notion of place is, there's this ubiquitous notion of place just because you can be anywhere all the time because we have these phones that don't usually leave our side, and if they do, it's usually getting the information on your watch. And so we have this notion of place that is no longer a physical space. And that notion of place enables us to be able to stand up for what we believe in or stand up for who we are as a brand in new and different ways. So if you think about IKEA, IKEA does that in this amazing way, because if you think about being a consumer, whether you're buying a pair of shoes or a piece of furniture, you always think about like, how amazing is this going to be when I bring it home or when I put this on, right? And when you bring it home, the most disappointing thing is you bring something home and you can picture how it'll look, whether it's the right color, whether it's the right shape or size, and it's just not. And that's epically disappointing, especially for audiences who, you know, people and customers who actually don't have access to a car, who had to borrow a car, or had to get these goods delivered to them, right? And they get them into their house, and then they actually don't fit. And so up to the millimeter, IKEA actually has the ability to be able to size up a space, to be able to say, hey, this is what this thing here in this example is, this couch. This is what this couch is going to look like, both in terms of physical dimensions, but also in terms of color. And so whether it would fit into and it's using augmented reality, but fit into the space that you want to see it in so that you don't go through the trouble, and you actually, you know, can picture what this thing, this happens to be a couch, is going to do in your home. And so it establishes this notion and this different notion of place. If you think about place as well, you kind of think about the ownership of the ownership experience of a product. And so we work a lot with Panasonic, and you own a product, and you want to, again, own a product. And when you first start establishing a connection with a person, right? And if that person happens to be someone that you may want to, you know, date or be with for a while, you first need them to like you, right? And you get them to like you, and then if you're a brand, you get them to make their first purchase. But what we realize is that in making them have, you know, in creating that first purchase, we spend a lot of money on that first purchase as brand, you know, stewards. All of us are brand stewards in this room, and we spend a lot of money and our time on making sure that people know about us and making sure that first transaction takes place. What we don't spend enough time on, I think, is actually retaining the customers we have. And that is what great brands do, is that they actually reaffirm your love for that, not just like for the brand, but they actually build that love for the brand and all the experiences that they actually establish in in owning that brand. And so they changed the notion of place, which is not just where you purchase that product, but also place in terms of where you use that product. And so what Panasonic is doing is they're working on, they have this set of projectors. And what they're working on is they have IoT technology inside their projectors that look at fan speed. They look at how old the light bulbs are. They actually look at how long a projector has been on. And they actually change the notion of the relationship that they have with their customers because they send them information. They say, hey, we noticed actually that you could probably lower your billing, your electricity bills because you actually keep your projector on the whole time. So not only are electricity bills probably really high, but you're probably actually wearing out your fan and actually using your light bulbs far more than you need to. So you might want to think of more efficient use of our products. And so that makes the relationship be different. And it doesn't just take the notion of place being where you actually bought and transacted. It takes this notion of place being wherever you're using the product and establishing that tighter connection. And that tighter connection is the difference between good and great. So if we think about this good and great and this notion of good and great, I'd be willing to bet, and I don't bet that much, but I'd be willing to bet that none of us are in this room to be mediocre. You're not like, yeah, I think I'm going to take 3 to 4 days out of my normal workday, which emails are piling up and there's other things you could be doing, and I'm sure people are trying to get in touch with you as you're sitting here right now. Is that you're not going to invest this time and think, I'm just going to leave here and I just want to be mediocre, right? Like that's not why you're doing it. Although this is again, I'm biased, but this is an incredible place to be. But if you're going to be in this incredible place and you're going to spend it in here versus out there, which is really exceptional, you're not doing it to be mediocre, either as an individual marketer or a professional, or either in terms of how you stand up for your brand. There are so many things that are at our disposal now, right? Not the least of which each other here, right? A lot of us are here just to learn from each other. And so I'd ask us all just kind of think about the fundamentals that we actually somewhat ignore, right? They're obvious. Like if you are here and you're reconnecting, and a lot of you are probably here reconnecting with colleagues that you haven't seen because you just reconnected events. And if you had a colleague that said, never leave a message, a voicemail on my cell phone because I won't pick it up. If you had a colleague that said that to you and you knew that about them, and then you had a colleague that said, look, I'm vegan, so just like I'd love to get together with you at the gathering, but let's make sure we go to a place that I can, find something to eat. You would never call them, leave them a message and say, hey, let's go to the Chop House, right, upstairs where they have amazing steak. Like you just wouldn't do that, but we do that with our customers all the time. And so I think we have to remind ourselves that, think about the relationship and think about we're not just building these transactions with people, right? That's ultimately what we want to do is have people buy things, but we want to build this love for our products and our services. And so I, would encourage us all, and I think that I have to do this as well, is continue to kind of look up and think about the fundamentals and think about how we're applying those fundamentals and building these relationships with our customers. So I thank you very much for your time in listening to me, and I'd like to turn this to a dialogue and invite Bradley up to the table, our beautiful table here, and actually entertain some questions or some comments from you all. So thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you.
How you feeling?
I feel good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have any questions ready from the audience yet, but just while we're waiting, I can't really
see any of you, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, you could be doing a lot of things, and we can't see any.
I hope everyone has their clothes on still. Or not, but yeah.
I hope you do.
Yeah.
You might not. I hope you do.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no.
So just to sort of kick things off here, I think you're totally onto something with fundamentals and the reminder of the fact of how important they are, because I think in sort of this day and age and time and where we are with marketing, and not just marketing technology and what we call practices on the firm side. But I think what would be really great is maybe you could just tell me a little bit about, or take us further down this road of good versus great brands, and what do you think the biggest elements that are holding businesses back? These good brands that are doing pretty good, but what's preventing them from sort of crossing that chasm into being a great brand?
I think that in working with both, I've been on the practitioner side before, and then also on the vendor side. And I think, in working on the inside, being you. And then also on the vendor side, we sit there and we think of that there's a silver bullet. Like there has to be some magic, and there probably is magic in, in what we can create and the connections we can create with brands. But a lot of that magic has to do with the culture that you build within a company. A lot of that magic has to be, it's not just a marketer's job, and I think that I've noticed, our jobs change as marketers as time has worn on over the last 20 years, in that we have to bring a lot of other constituents along with us to be able to really be, epically successful as brands, and that is the IT department, right? If you, for example, right?
For sure.
And finance, like you want to invest in a lot of things, and so we have the latitude now as marketers to actually make a choice of what types of applications we invest in, but we need the CFO to approve it. We also need the IT department to actually want to implement these technologies, so they actually see the value. Totally.
Right? Like, we were talking about this actually, right? Where it's like, how many conversations am I having with people that were promoted out of IT into marketing because of, the volume of data and the incorporation of technology. So we're really seeing a blend of these really critical two elements where 15 years ago, there wasn't even an IT department, right?
Well, and if they're in the IT department just wasn't involved with marketing decisions. And so we're noticing we need those skills inside marketing, but we also need to bring these other pieces of the company along.
Maybe there's, we'll get some audience, great.
We can actually see you.
How much time do you have to allocate to learning? Like, say you're working with STRAVA on how they're deploying their emails and trying to work on engagement. Like, what's the right amount of time, or what's an acceptable amount of time to just say, guys, let's just try this before we start tinkering with it, or do you just start tinkering right away? Like, there's an element of optimization as we work through automation and those different relationships, but how much time do you have to allocate to just letting it exist before you start trying to fix or optimize?
I think it's a really good question. I think that, we have to understand a few fundamental things, like who's your customer, what are you trying to do for your customer, and do you believe it actually differentiates yourself from others? Often I've worked with companies that are like, we want to compete against Amazon. Well, you're not going to outprice Amazon, so you got to think about what principles you're actually trying to compete on and what legitimizes your ability to differentiate yourself, right? So who's your customer? And sometimes a lot of brands know that of themselves, so you can get in really quickly and say, we know this is our customer base, we know what we're standing for, we have this great message, and then we can get into it. I think the most successful ways to actually, whether you're using marketing technology or whether you're doing other things to be able to elevate your brand, is starting with a proof of concept and just testing and learning and iterating. Because you can navel gaze forever on the perfect solution, which is never perfect the day you put it in. Like, for as much as you navel gazed, things change the day you put it in, and things are never as you imagined. And so, I think fundamentally have seen much better success both, when I was, chief digital marketing officer of SAP, for example, or at Amazon or Microsoft, in driving to first drive proof of concept and learning and iterating and innovating and driving a culture that does that and constantly learns and uses data and fails fast, rather than, again, thinking of the perfect solution, and taking a year to get there and then realizing that you're going to learn anyhow. So I think that a shorter runway, so how much time? We've seen putting something up in terms of, an experimental program or, putting up a technology within 3 to 6 weeks. Again, you've got to have the whole team motivated to actually, make the decisions they need to make. And if you involve different departments, they have to be on board. But, 3 to 6 weeks is sufficient time to proof of concept something and, iterate and learn. Again, but you have to have the culture and the decision-making processes and cycles to be ready to actually drive in that time frame.
Other questions? Great.
You talked a lot about customer engagement. Being the global president, I'm sure you have a lot of employees and teams looking up to you. Can you tell me what internal engagement looks like for you and how you inspire from within?
Yeah, internal engagement is huge, and I really don't think that you can have a really successful brand unless you actually have that type of engagement among the people you get to work with. It's a privilege to get to work with the people I get to work with. Some of them are here. And unless you see employee engagement, I think that great brands have really high employee engagement, and great brands have employees who really love the products or services that they sell. And so our internal engagement is this balance of, as for me, when I used to, be a leader of smaller teams, I could have everyone over for dinner, right? Number one, because they were both in the same locale, and I could actually fit that many people in my, my kitchen, which was a very small kitchen. But then now we have people that are, in dozens of countries and thousands of employees, and we're a part of Adobe now, which makes us even bigger. And so employee engagement is important, and so we think of this cadence of making sure that we set an example of, hey, this is where we're headed, and these are the decisions we made, and this is why. And so it's a set of, we look at quarterly, checkpoints that we need to make, and have all hands. We look at more frequent ways to be able to actually connect with individuals, to be able to inform individuals more broadly on our teams, whether it's through newsletters. But I actually think that the most important part of connecting is having open forums where you can, so keeping people updated broadly, great. And those are sort of like in Maslow's hierarchy, something you should do. But I think as a leader, I think the most important element is being accessible. And that is, being accessible, because again, I travel to 2 or 3 cities usually every week. And so making time to say, hey, I'm going to get together with a set of individuals, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have open office hours, and you can ask me anything you want, or you can say anything you want to me. And you actually get a lot of insight about how people are feeling and thinking, as long as you establish that rapport and, you create a culture where you make people feel like you are listening, and you're not just like, that you're paying them lip service and you're just there to be there, but you're actually listening and wanting to do something with the things that people are telling you. I actually think that's the most meaningful connections you can have. And so it's an effort that I know I try to make every office that I'm in, is to make sure that those hours actually take place. And then what I'm going to start establishing is open office hours. And this is a lesson from Mr. Zuckerberg and Sheryl is that they have open office hours virtually it's in the office every Friday, and they spend an hour every single Friday, and people can call in, but they have it on their campus where they actually just stand there and actually address questions and open themselves up to the entire employee base, which I think is really exceptional. And I think a lesson of that playbook is actually that's something I want to do. So I'll be starting that in the next few weeks, is having open office hours and just opening it up, not having an agenda, and not sitting there and saying, well, I have no agenda, but I'm going to take the next 45 minutes just to talk at you, is just sit there and listen. And so I think that that's one of the most fundamental things we can do as leaders, is just to listen.
And you totally nailed it in regards to internal engagement. I mean, we know it, as we've analyzed hundreds and thousands of brands, the ones that really rise to the top, are the ones that have really perfected that. And, some of the things that you're talking about from a tactical or practices perspective are elements that they incorporate. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I've got a couple of questions that have come in through Twitter, and we'll just try to hammer these out. What is the line between understanding digital cues and hyper-personalization? Carmel's interested.
Yeah, understanding digital cues can come from lots of different places, and the challenge with that is 2 things. One is maintaining people's stance on their own privacy. So I am willing to actually provide as much information as I possibly can to actually make my life more convenient. But I have a peer who actually just lives, 500 meters away from me, who actually has she has the same type of position in life that I do, and same socioeconomic status, same, like, she has kids, et cetera. She actually doesn't want anybody to know anything about her. So I think, number one, things you know about your customers. We are like, if you looked at us, we'd be digital twins, right? We're the same age within a few months. We live in the same neighborhoods, same, a lot of things. So you'd think you should treat these 2 women the same. But if you did, you would make her very angry. Yeah. If you used her information, and you would actually make me very angry if you actually didn't treat me like you knew me. And then there's third-party data, which if you looked at, I don't know if any of you have looked at your Blue Sky data. It's data that Oracle actually captures, credit card data that's actually captured about you, and marketers use to be able to market to you, and you could use for your own customers. If you looked at my Blue Sky data, I am a white-collar worker and a blue-collar worker. I am likely to drive a Chevrolet, which I don't own American cars. And I am single, and I am married. Like, I'm actually the both of everything. So if you use that data to actually make decisions on my behalf, you would be wrong half the time. And so part of that is using, the right information and trusting the information you have. And so it's this convergence of trust in knowing your customer and how creepy do they think you are if you use the information you know about them, and also having good data to be able to be personal.
Yeah.
And so it's a really tough line to draw.
This is this case against, the day of demographics are gone and, psychographics are the thing.
Totally.
And then, it's actually even one step further. I mean, behavioral is fine, right? But it's really like getting to this place of emotive, like understanding the beliefs and feelings of the individual and why they're motivated to do whatever they're motivated to do. I think we're there, but, it has to be more deliberate than, just analyzing
totally
credit card data, because my purchase preferences don't necessarily relate specifically to the way that I perceive the world, right?
No.
Like I'm in my early 40s and like I love sneakers, right? So, if you looked at me sort of like from purchasing behavior, it would look like I was buying my kids a ton of stuff, right?
That's really you.
That it's really me, right?
Totally.
So, what kind of messaging do you send me?
Absolutely. But we tell our brands a lot of things, and our customers tell us a lot of things as brands. Like if you're always seeing your customer opt out of you sending them things, and they're always seeing, your customers tell us these things, we just don't listen, right? And you can capture things so that, again, myself and my digital twin, you would treat us differently. You would treat us differently, but you could delight both of us, right? We actually both love the same restaurants. We both love the same things. We love the same hotels, but how you would appeal to her and me are totally different. And if brands listen to that, they would be able to continue to appeal to us.
Yeah.
But I think we have to listen and capture that information. And there's technology out there, whether you're a tiny company or a really big company, there's technology out there that actually helps us do that, which is great.
A couple more here from Twitter, unless we have one from the audience. All right. So Travis is curious about, how do you get a client to revisit and discuss their fundamentals instead of pursuing something cutting edge and sexy?
Yeah, pursuing that, unless you've got the fundamentals down, is just kind of a fool's errand, right? You've got to start with the fundamentals. If you don't, if you deploy a set of, lesson learned for me when I was at SAP was we had, a condition of my employment, which is how I got this job, longer story than we're going to go into now, but was like, we have to have Marketo. And this is before I was president of Marketo, but, we have to have Marketo. And so we're like, okay, no problem, we're going to get it in. And we got Marketo, and then we realized, crap, we actually don't have people within our company that actually can use Marketo. Like the notion of actually driving a campaign, right? And we have campaigns and we land them for 12 weeks and then we measure them for 6 weeks. And then maybe 6 months later, we realize the value of the campaign was where we were at SAP, versus A/B testing. And actually you realize that your test is going badly, or you don't see the engagement you want to see. So in the moment, you're going to change the copy. People are like, there's what? Like, you want us to do what? And so we realized that, the amazing technology, the new and sexy way of doing things is actually really hard to do unless you have the fundamentals in place. And so the way we work with customers, whether, I was at Marketo, but I am at Marketo and Adobe, but, when I was a practitioner, was actually look where I actually realistically sat in terms of my maturity and application of the fundamentals. And realizing if you don't get those right and you don't slow down to speed up, you actually won't ever get to the sexy, amazing part, because you don't have the skills in place, the infrastructure in place, the buy-in from IT or your CFO to actually make the changes you need to make. And so there are adoption curves that we have, every company has, not every company, but lots of agencies have them, lots of consultants. I know you guys have something similar. But there's ways that you can say, where am I really against my peers? And where do I sit? And what do I actually need to fundamentally shift to get to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage? In some cases, you can actually leapfrog from one to the next. You have to get those fundamentals down. So really assessing where you are and recognizing where that is, and then knowing what the next step is, whether it's investments in people or whether it's collaborating with your peers or investing in new technology, is something you have to actually understand before you can get to that amazing and sexy part of being a marketer.
We've talked about this variation between authenticity and how that was a buzz term, and how I use the word legitimacy, right?
Totally.
And really what I'm trying to say is you need to earn it. right?
Totally, yeah.
So like you can't just go in, and we've heard some of the brands over the last day and a half talk about in their own language how they've earned their place, but that's really what you're talking about. I mean, if you're in a B2B position versus a B2C position, you know, the way you earn it is different, and you know, you can't just bring something in and turn it on and have it work, right? Like you need to work for your consumers, right?
Right.
And when we figure that out, you know, how you can just turn the switch on, you know, we'll be in a much better
really rich
yeah,
people.
totally. Last question, and I think we got to wrap it up, but Alex is curious, how do you know your prospects are antisocial vegans? How do you get to know your customers and engineer unique experiences so your messaging doesn't fall flat?
I think you listen. I mean, there is a lot of telemetry that you can gather. You can look at how individuals actually, you know, consume what you've got out there in terms of how they engage with your website. If you put something on your website and they're willing to opt in or engage with you in that way, you can gather all the information in terms of how they're interacting socially, how they're interacting on your website, whether they're consuming the content you have. Those actually are really good predictive elements for how a company or a customer, an individual, wants to interact with you. So if you listen, it's out there. There's third-party data that you can actually tie to, so Blue Kai is not perfect, but it actually provides you some good information. And you don't have to share PII information because you can't say, here's the credit card number for Bradley, will you give me all the information you have about him? But they actually anonymize it, so you say, here's all my customers, and Bradley will be code 526, match it with Blue Kai 526, and we can match it without it knowing it's Bradley, and also without sharing his PII information, but then you can find out more insights about him. He loves sneakers, buys a lot of them. So there's other third-party data, you know, elements that you can get, but I think often just listening to how your customers engage with you in social, on your website, you know, in your emails, what do they read? If you actually listen to that, you get a ton of insights, just as you would a conversation with an individual.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's an example of co-creation, right? Like, I mean, it's like not only are you soliciting feedback, but how are you bringing them into the fold and then reacting to that in such a way that it has an impact on your business and on their life.
And demonstrating that you've listened.
100%.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, great. I think it's a good place to end unless there's other questions. Okay, well, Mika,
cool.
thank you.
Yeah, no
Always
problem.
a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
thank you. Bye.
That's good.